Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. I'm carrying on my video about Mr. Ben Shapiro and his tactics in fooling his audiences. Well, he is a master in the usage of straw man arguments. In case you don't know, a straw man is falsely attributing an argument to the other side, claiming the other side, you called for this, and that's obviously preposterous, when in fact the other side didn't call for that. Now this is not quite an example of it, but the minimum wage debate, when people are saying, should we have the minimum wage at $15, he said, well, why not go all the way up to $100? Now, nobody's calling for a $100 minimum wage. So that is a little bit like a straw man. If someone had actually called for a minimum wage, well, clearly that would be preposterous. Now, guns, he does this one on guns as well, saying, well, why don't you go all the way and ban handguns like that? Well, no one's proposing banning handguns. Fair enough, he didn't actually say that they'd done this. I mean, most gun control people in the United States don't want to go that far. But there are other countries, for example, the United Kingdom, where handguns have been outlawed since 1996. So he has his talking points, and one of these in the United States about firearms is that they're needed for a revolution. But where are they actually used for revolutionary activity in the world? Well, one of the places would be Palestine, but he doesn't want them there. He said the United States people need firearms in case they need to resist tyranny. The Palestinians would say, and they're doing just that. So he launches a lot of vitriol against Palestinians, most of whom are Muslims, and against Muslims in general. Sure, there certainly are bad Muslims, and there are some bad Islamic organizations, and there's some bad Islamic governments. But now, in fairness to Mr. Shapiro, he doesn't say they're absolutely all bad, but he likes to disseminate well-known Islamophobic tropes. He's masterly in his use of hyperbole, saying that Obama is Jew-hating. Now, it was patently a stinking lie. How nauseating to try to exploit anti-Semitism like that. And it's like the boy who cried wolf, because if you go round making these bogus accusations of anti-Semitism, you're less likely to be believed when it really happens. So there's anti-Semitism in the world anyway, which is dreadful. No need to go inventing it when it's not there. If President Obama was so anti-Jewish, why is it that AIPAC donated to him? It's just for the birds, the idea that Obama detested Jewish people. Why did AIPAC invite him to address them? Oh, I know he was president. Okay, but if he really was anti-Jewish, AIPAC would not have asked him to do that. And the Anti-Defamation League didn't say that he was anti-Jewish. Why was he invited as an honoured guest to Israel on several occasions? It's sickening that Shapiro should be perpetuating these myths that anyone who doesn't do exactly what Tel Aviv says is anti-Jewish. Obama, who appointed so many Jewish people to high offices in the cabinet and elsewhere, not remotely anti-Jewish, not an anti-Semitic bone in his body. So Mr. Shapiro was irate when Israel was, well, not even thwarted, when Israel wasn't simply supported verbally in one of his highly controversial policies, when it killed lots of Palestinian civilians. So he was vituperative towards Obama. I suppose he knew that that would go down well with some of his more closed-minded supporters. But he was not this way towards George W. Bush, or he's not this way towards President Trump. I wonder why not. Well, have they done exactly what Israel said? To a large extent they have. Maybe that's it. Anyway, coming on to Benghazi, I remember Mr. Shapiro saying that Obama ought to be prosecuted. You should read his book, his bile about Obama, The People versus Obama. Now, obviously, not every word of it is false. But coming on to the Benghazi attack, American diplomats were killed there in about 2011, and Clinton was the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, that is. But anyway, American diplomats were killed abroad under President Bill Clinton and under Ronald Reagan, maybe in other times as well, or they were taken hostage in Iran under Carter. But Mr. Shapiro said that obviously that Obama should be prosecuted because people got killed. It was quite dangerous and nothing was done to save them. Now, there could have been attempts to evacuate these people, or they could have sent more Marines there or something like that. So perhaps it was a bit dilatory when there was some danger in Benghazi. But, being a US diplomat is somewhat dangerous. Accepting a posting in Libya is very dangerous. I've never heard anyone say that previous US presidents should be prosecuted when things went wrong for US diplomats abroad. I mean, take the East Africa bombings in 1998. There were rumbles. Al-Qaeda was attacking US interests for a long time before that. So they should have seen that coming. They should have closed the embassies. That would have to be the argument. But that would be disproportionate. Or let's say US diplomats killed abroad, including in Pakistan under Reagan. Well, Pakistan was fairly dangerous, so they should have had no embassy, or I'm not sure what else they should have done. But anyway, surprise, surprise, there's been no prosecution of President Obama. Oh well, perhaps the case against him is not so overwhelming. So Mr. Shapiro is held as being oracular over Muslims, saying that they're a grave threat, but he doesn't seem to offer any solution. And he did cite opinion polls where many Muslims expressed the most rebarbative views, you know, how apostates should be put to death and things like that, which is very troubling. But he does this to obviously spread anti-Muslim sentiment around the world, and there's a lot of anti-Muslim animus in the United States as it is. Mr. Shapiro, he's a fervent believer in the Bible. What does the Old Testament say should be done for people who worship other gods? Well, maybe Mr. Shapiro doesn't believe in the Bible after all, if he doesn't call for that punishment to be implemented. And if he does, well then, he disagrees with Muslims, but about a different religion, but about what should be done to those who change their religion. So he may be perceived as a Cassandra in warning against Islam, how it jeopardizes liberty everywhere. But what does he propose? A war against the whole Muslim world? I don't think so. I think probably not putting their back up would help a bit, and trying to persuade people to calm down and be a bit more moderate, be a bit more tolerant, and say, if you want to change your faith, we won't harm you in any way. So he likes venting his spleen at Muslims. Anyway, Mr. Shapiro is at the very least degrading towards gays, though he has deigned to meet, who's that guy, Rubin. And I know when he met Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Mr. Shapiro, he scorned him as a bureaucratic leftist on climate change. What a branding reproach. But Mr. Shapiro, he wants things banned, he wants things done, interventionist government. You know, on drugs, he wants obviously mass incarceration. He wants abortion to be outlawed and things like that. He thinks that morality is very much a public issue, but surely that's quite bureaucratic. Leftists, in some ways, tend to be more libertarian on some of these things. After all, he's a lawyer, Mr. Shapiro. Well, lawyers need laws to argue about, and they would like legislative hyperactivity, because that's more work for them. If we really had minimal laws, there would be fewer court cases, less litigation, and all the rest of it, and less money for lawyers. Now, coming on to Iran, he indulges in all these philippics against Iran. And which country introduced nuclear weapons in the Middle East? It was Israel. And obviously Mr. Shapiro is a cheerleader for everything Israel does. And the Israeli government lied through its teeth. Shimon Peres in the 80s publicly avowed that Israel would never introduce nuclear weapons to the region. Sorry, it wouldn't be the first to introduce them to the region, despite knowing full well that his country had done precisely that several years earlier, often by stealing military technology from the United States, spying on the United States. What's that guy who just got released? I can't remember his name. Jonathan Pollard, for instance. So all these diatribes against Iran, how aggressive it is. Well, which Middle Eastern country is occupying some of another Middle Eastern country? Well, Israel is occupying Palestine. Israel is occupying the Golan Heights of Syria. And Israel occupied South Lebanon for 18 years. The Iranians, they are in Syria at the invitation of the Syrian government. And were it not for them, ISIS would have taken over Syria, maybe taken over Lebanon and Jordan and so on. People who really are hell-bent on the destruction of Israel. And as Mr. Shapiro, as he detests extremist Islam, really he should be thanking the Iranians. Now I know Iran is a Sharia state, but it's not savage like ISIS is. I know there's a lot wrong with it, but they do at least allow women's sport, women to vote and things like that. They have multi-party elections, which are a bit unpredictable. Government candidates don't always win. Women are allowed to drive and so on. They allow things like that, some music, so they're not as bad as ISIS by any means. They allow some visual art. So Mr. Shapiro, he delivers his lines with utter conviction, and that dupes many. And remember how he thinks that weapons make you safer? mean that fewer people would get killed, but not in the case of Palestine or not in the case of Iran. If you really thought that weapons made the world safer, then he should be welcoming the Palestinians getting more weapons. They need to defend their homeland, and welcoming the Iranians getting nuclear weapons, because of course, weapons don't kill people, only people kill people. So I wish this was more widely understood amongst his Christian fundamentalist fan base. Mr. Shapiro wants to expel Christian citizens from their country, and indeed Muslim citizens from their country. I'm talking about Israeli Christians and Israeli Muslims, and Israeli Druze people. It's questionable whether the Druze are Muslim or not. He called for that in an article about 2003. It really was disgusting. How can he do that? Okay, they are Israeli Arabs. The trouble is, a lot of his ignorant fan base wouldn't realize that some Arabs are Christians, and probably the original descendants of Christians, far before Christianity got to Europe, which is where most white Americans came from. So the Arab Israeli minority is pullulating, and that is obviously diluting the Jewish character of the state. And Mr. Shapiro is clearly an ethno-nationalist. Some woman who was speaking to called Israel an apartheid state, which is unfair, it's an exaggeration, but there is some official discrimination. I mean, certainly the occupied territories. But Mr. Shapiro wants it to be an apartheid state, or perhaps a monoracial state, by expelling the ethnic minorities. This is an article that he published years ago. He's never disavowed. So Israel is occupying Palestine, and that's a lie of omission when it comes to his discussions of the Palestinians fighting back. Now, people cite other historical examples, say, Poland was invaded by Germany, therefore the end of the war, Poland gained some of the land that Germany had invaded them from. That's true, but that was by international agreement. Same with the Soviets gaining some land that previously belonged to Germany. There was no international agreement that said, yes, we concur that Israel may take some Palestinian territory. And obviously the UN General Assembly repeatedly voted that the Israelis must leave the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip they largely have left, actually, but after decades of illegal occupation. So he's indignant when he's questioned about Israel's wrongdoing. It touches a raw nerve with him. I suppose it goes to the core of his identity. He's getting a bit hot under the yarmulke. So he's made a deep emotional investment in Israel, so he has to go through every twist and turn of logic to try and claim that Israel is so morally upstanding. And there are good things about Israel. Yes, it's true. I've talked about that in another video. Don't want to be too harsh. So he wishes to vindicate what he regards as being his ancestral homeland. He may well be a Khazar, actually. Those people from around the Caspian Sea who converted to Judaism. But criticisms of Israel really rankle with him. He says it's got the best human rights record in the region. Now, that's hard to contest. I mean, Lebanon might be close, but bear in mind the Middle East has got some of the worst human rights records for governments of anywhere in the world. Latin America will be better than almost all Middle Eastern countries. Most of Sub-Saharan Africa, likewise. Anywhere in Europe, really anywhere, Central Asia, about on a par. The Far East, usually better. There are obviously some egregious exceptions like North Korea, and that's it. Anywhere in the Western world, yeah, sure, better than virtually everywhere in the Middle East. But yes, okay, it's true that Israel is not that bad on human rights, especially considering the level of threat that it faces. So his proposition that ethnic minorities should be booted out is dishonourable to say the least. Think of Arab Israelis who fought for Israel, which Mr. Shapiro has not done. I mean, you can't refute that. But by not pointing out that some of them are Christians, then what he says will be acceptable to some of his Christian evangelical admirers. But he's managed to slip this bit under the radar. Now, I don't care whether they're Christian or they're not, but as I say, Mr. Shapiro's Christian fans would care about that very much. What would his snake handler Christian extremist friends think about that? I don't think they'd like it. So, anyway, this will be the panacea for all ills, according to him. So he's very combative, and that goes down well with people who think that makes him macho. He's very exercised about certain issues when it comes to security, defense, and so on. And he goes into every debate spoiling for a fight. So certainly you'll get fireworks for him, which people find highly entertaining. And I suppose, is it infotainment? Maybe it's more like opiniotainment. That is really how he wins people over.